Good morning. It is my honor to welcome you to the National Center for Aviation Training. I'm Sherry Utash, and I serve as the president of Wsu Tech. What an appropriate place to gather this morning to talk about workforce development and aviation, which are key to the economy of Kansas. And as always, Senator Moran, Congressman Estes are they're with us all the time, and they have done great work to build this bill that's going to provide relief for the aviation industry. So I really thank them so much because they are always watching out for us in Kansas, and they really watch out for the aviation industry in Wichita. So it is just a true honor to welcome all of you this morning and have everybody have a better understanding about what this new Aviation Manufacturing Jobs Protection Program brings to our state. So with that, I will turn it over to Senator Moran.
Madam President, thank you. Sherry, Madam President, thank you very much. Thanks for your hospitality in this fabulous facility and where employment and training and education come together with aviation, and exactly what I hope happens today. And we provide some valuable information to the Wichita aviation and aerospace businesses so that they can more easily and more quickly recover from the COVID-19, the pandemic consequences. So thank you very much for your presence here and for the opportunity to utilize this fabulous facility here in Wichita. And good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm hopeful and expecting that there will be valuable information that comes from our conversation today, not because I'm here, but because we've assembled the experts, including Elliot Black at the U.S. Department of Transportation, who is responsible for the implementation of the legislation that Congressman Estes and I were so involved in creating, drafting, and trying to get enacted into law. And we also have those here who have helped us along that path. Paul Fellman from Gamma and Tom Gentile from Spirit, but here representing the Aerospace Industries of America, AIA, that was instrumental in pushing and insisting that we not back away from all the challenges we faced in getting a bill passed into law. I have a caveat because if anyone ever assumes that I'm bragging about a piece of legislation and they determine that I didn't vote for it, they criticize me. And this is a piece of legislation that became law as part of the $1.9 trillion American Recovery Act. And so I want to be honest with my constituents. Ultimately, I didn't vote for $1.9 trillion, but Senator Warner, a Democrat from Virginia, and I introduced this legislation and pursued it with the significant encouragement from the industry. And then as we developed the legislation, Senator Cantwell, a Democrat from Washington State, really took the lead in making sure that this bill was included in what ultimately was passed by the Democrat majority of the Senate and became law, supported by President Biden. It includes this provision of assistance to aviation, aerospace companies in regard to trying to keep workforce in place so that during the pandemic with less work, we don't lose our most valuable assets, our employees, and particularly those with specialized capabilities. And so this is, we are hoping and believe to be something that is still of value. We are thinking and hoping that COVID is generally behind us. But I would tell you from my perspective across Kansas, probably the slowest recovery following this pandemic is here in South Central Kansas, where we're still recovering from the consequences of the pandemic, which is, although I flew last night and I don't know that it's true anymore, less people flying and more demand for commercial aircraft. It seems to be rapidly changing, and that is good news for us. But the challenges that come from an aviation community and a state like ours, I think we have a slower response, a slower recovery to good news. And so this program is designed to keep people together. It's a public-private partnership. Some of our thoughts were, rather than paying unemployment insurance costs, could we get the government to assist us, the taxpayers to assist us in keeping those employees employed rather than unemployed, earning unemployment benefits, but on the payroll, and the other half of that payroll paid by the company. And so we're delighted that we do have the expert, and I appreciate Mr. Black coming to Kansas. I was telling him I suited him up. I tried to create no circumstance in which he couldn't be here. As I was questioning the secretary, the soon-to-be Secretary of Transportation in the committee before his confirmation, my question was, can you commit to me that somebody significant and important and knowledgeable from the U.S. Department of Transportation will be in Wichita, Kansas to help us implement and explain and perhaps take some feedback back to Washington, D.C. on this legislation? So we are, again, I will quit repeating myself saying that I'm delighted to be with you, but more importantly, I'm delighted that our guests are with us and that you all are here to learn more about the Aviation Manufacturing Jobs Protection Program. I'm going to turn this conversation over to a couple of my colleagues in the creation of this. I again want to thank Congressman Estes. He's unable to be here. He's in Washington, D.C. today. He's going to appear shortly by video. But Debbie Lupfer is here, and Congressman Estes played a significant role. We can't, people are pointing over, up in the back. People, as you know, if you remember your high school government class, a bill becomes law when it passes the Senate, passes the House, and is signed by the President. And so we've had the support of Congressman Estes and House members. We obviously were successful in the Senate. And President Biden, with the help of Democrats in the Senate, included this provision in the bill, and President Biden signed it. I also want to highlight for you that on Tuesday, I will be back in Wichita. I'm out of Washington, D.C. for the next week because of the 4th of July, and we're using Tuesday and Wednesday. Blue Origin, a rocket and space company, reached out to me to ask if there would be Kansas companies who would be interested in doing business with them. One of our goals in my time in the Congress is to put myself in a position in which I'm helpful to aerospace and aviation. I'm a member of the Commerce Committee, which has jurisdiction over the FAA and UAVs, for example. I'm a member of the Appropriations Committee and a defense appropriator that sometimes the defense companies are interested in visiting with. And certainly we have businesses here in Wichita who do business with defense. And I'm also I used to be the chairman in the Republican days, now the ranking Republican on the subcommittee on appropriations that funds NASA. So Blue Origin reached out to see if there is interest in business in Kansas. The president, the CEO of Blue Origin will be in Wichita next Tuesday. We're hosting a reception with the help of the Greater Wichita Partnership for him and his team. And then he has chosen some businesses that he would like to personally visit while here, all with the goal of trying to diversify the economy of Kansas, and particularly to diversify those of you who are involved in aviation, to make it not just commercial or not just defense, but to add those components, including space. And I think there will be a growing emphasis on space exploration and space travel, both in the public and private sector. And Blue Origin is one of those companies that is on its way to Kansas to see if they can find businesses here that would be helpful to you. I tell you that for purposes, if you're interested in the reception, to try to meet Bob Smith or to hear what he has to say about opportunities for businesses associated with his business, please join us on Tuesday, late afternoon, for that reception. And I think you were handed a piece of paper as you came in the door. So let me make sure, is my next introduction of Congressman Estes or of Tom Gentile? Let's hear from Congressman Estes, if you're ready.
Thank you all for taking the time to be here today and to learn more about the Aviation Manufacturing Jobs Protection Program. I'm honored to be hosting this event with Senator Moran. I would also like to recognize and thank the U.S. Department of Transportation's Aviation Manufacturing Jobs Protection Program Director, Elliott Black, Spirit Aerosystems CEO, Tom Gentile, who is representing Aerospace Industries Association, and Paul Feldman, who is representing the General Aviation Manufacturers Association. Unfortunately, I could not be with you all today. I'm still in Washington, D.C. casting votes, but I can assure you all that you are in good hands. The aviation manufacturing industry is part of the bedrock of our community. We all know that COVID-19 has had an overwhelming effect on the industry. The global pandemic led to an unprecedented drop in air travel, resulting in a significant decline in the production of new aircraft and a reduced demand for modifications, parts, and repairs. With this drop, hundreds of jobs were lost, with many more at risk. In 2020, the CARES Act was signed into law to help Americans across the country navigate the pandemic, providing grants and loan opportunities. Despite this, many aviation companies were unable to take advantage of them because of restrictions. Seeing the missing support for the aviation manufacturing industry led me and Senator Moran to call for additional aid. With Kansans in mind, we developed the Aviation Manufacturing Jobs Protection Program to alleviate some of the worst impacts on the industry. Importantly, it allows aviation manufacturers to enter a 50-50 public-private partnership with the Department of Transportation. This program aims to protect the aviation manufacturing industry, workforce, and supply chain. As this legislation progressed through Congress, it was met with bipartisan support. A rare occurrence in Washington, but an understandable conclusion considering the benefits that would come not only to the air capital of the world, but throughout the country. Thanks to over a century of Wichita's aviation innovation, we are the leader in general, commercial, and defense aviation manufacturing, a feat that's attributable to our long-standing history of a highly skilled workforce. Many families have second and third generation aviation manufacturers, creating a unique culture of family and industry. Without the generations of skilled workers who are always striving for innovation, we wouldn't be the air capital of the world. Now it is time to ensure that this skilled workforce stays at home here in the Sunflower State. This program doesn't just solve the short-term unemployment issue, but retains workers to keep them here for the long term. And when manufacturing has resumed to full capacity, it will lead to our economy's recovery. I would like to thank Wsu Tech and Dr. Utash for not only hosting us, but for also being an integral part of the aviation manufacturing industry in our community. Many of the skilled workers I've previously mentioned graduated from the National Center for Aviation Training here at Wsu Tech. The world-class applied learning in the aerospace manufacturing technology, aviation maintenance technology, and many other programs prepare our students to prosper with aviation careers. I'm proud to support the aviation manufacturing industry, an industry I know well after many years working within it myself. I believe that this program is an invaluable resource that will aid our community as we continue down the path to recovery. Thank you.
Congressman Estes did a really nice job. I think next time I'm going to record my remarks for you. It seemed much more professional than my capabilities. But Ron was a great colleague and companion in trying to get this accomplished, and we, as he said, we had success, and he explained it very well. Let me now bring to the podium Tom Gentile, so well known in this community, certainly a significant a CEO of a significant company, an important component of the economy, but also a significant community leader. And in this capacity as AIA representative, really a driving force, one of several, to get this bill accomplished. Tom.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Moran, and good morning, everyone. Before I begin, I'd like to take the opportunity again to thank Sherry Utash, president of WSU Tech, for hosting this event. And it's actually the second event I've been at this week at WSU Tech. Earlier this week, we had the opportunity to recognize and pay tribute to Dr. Rosemary Kirby, who was the first president of WATC, the predecessor for WSU Tech. And as you walked into this student center today, you might have noticed a sculpture of two young children playing with a toy airplane. And that was what we dedicated to Dr. Kirby earlier this week. And what it symbolizes is really the nobility of the jobs that we have in aviation, and also highlighting the importance of technical education in what we do. And it's a bronze statue. It's a remarkable tribute to a wonderful individual who had a terrific career. But as you think about what that statue stands for, the sculpture, it's about noble aviation jobs. And they are noble. They are high-tech. They are long-standing. They're innovative. They have a global nature to them. And they're worth preserving. And that's what this bill does. And so I'm very proud to have been a part of it in a small way. But I want to thank the fact that Senator Moran and Congressman Estes were supporting it from the very beginning. When you go back to the beginning of 2020, our industry and our community here in Wichita in the aviation industry was facing really a dual crisis. For many of us, we're big suppliers to the Boeing MAX program. After, as you know, after two really tragic crashes, that program was grounded. And then at the end of 2019, production stopped. So that was the first crisis. And then the second crisis came. And so we were all really grappling with that. And when that pandemic hit and the economy started to slow down in so many industries, we kept producing, but at a much lower rate. And the first CARES Act came out, and then the second, and the third, and the fourth. And Congressman Estes and Senator Moran supported this bill from the very beginning. And unfortunately, we didn't get in those first four CARE Acts. But the fifth one, finally we did. Their perseverance, their dedication, and commitment to this industry really came through, and we now have a bill to support aerospace manufacturing, and that's very important. And the reason why it's important now, because everybody says, well, we're so far through it, maybe we don't need the support. And actually we do, because everybody here as an industry knows that even as production rates start to go up, and we do see domestic travel increasing, it's now at about 75% of where it was pre-pandemic levels. So we have to start producing, particularly the narrow-body aircraft that support domestic travel, like the MAX, like the A320. But to do that, you have to start hiring months and months in advance. You have to put your material orders in months in advance. And then you have to start producing those new products. And then the way the aviation industry works is often you don't get paid until 90 days after you deliver. So you could be looking at 6 to 9 months of lead time between when you start expending cash and when you start getting paid for that work. And so what this bill does, the $3 billion, is help provide some cash relief for that so that companies can start rehiring workers, start providing training to their workers to meet the needs of the aviation cycle as we begin this recovery. So this, I would argue that now is the most important time where this support will be very useful. And I also want to thank my colleagues in the Aviation Aerospace Industries Association, AIA, for all their support. During this whole time period, they were involved. They worked with Senator Moran and Congressman Estes, and that was a major impetus as well to help get this passed. In addition, we had support from our union, the International Association of Machinists. Robert Martinez, the president, was very involved in this as well. So you can see there were a lot of people involved. But at the end of the day, it really takes strong congressional support. And we were lucky and fortunate to have Senator Moran and Congressman Estes and their colleagues, Senator Cantwell from Washington and also Congressman Larson. So it was not only bipartisan, it was bicameral. And the combination of that support really helped ensure its passage. And as I said, it couldn't come at a better time. This act for the Aviation Manufacturing Jobs Support Program will help preserve employment stability in the industry as we begin this recovery. So it's a very important time. This bill is extremely important, and we very much appreciate all the support, Senator Moran, that you provided in your leadership during this critical time. So thank you.
And now let me introduce Paul Feldman, who I've known since my arrival in Congress, and not just suggesting that you're old, Paul, but there's a number of associations that are important to us as Kansans, but one of them is the General Aviation Manufacturers Association. And we're delighted that Paul is here, and we're delighted that GAMA was so engaged in the effort to get this legislation passed and helped us line up after helping us craft the bill, helped us line up the votes to accomplish it. And I appreciate your willingness to travel from Washington, D.C. Please welcome Vice President of Government Affairs for GAMA, Paul Feldman. Paul, thanks.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about, I think the first time we met, I came to aviation hearing in Wichita you hosted on Wichita State. So first wanted to just thank our hosts. I really appreciated Tom's story about the statue, because I walked in today and I went, that's a great statue, and I hadn't realized it was such a recent addition to the campus. So thank you very, very much. First of all, as others, thank you, Senator Moran and Congressman Estes, for holding this information session. As a representative of the General Aviation Manufacturers Association, whose membership is composed of the leading companies in general aviation maintenance and manufacturing, and many of whom are here today, we are grateful for the work both of you have done to support the industry, particularly as we continue to navigate the impacts of the pandemic. As with so many issues, we rely so much on your leadership and commitment, especially when we face our greatest challenges, but also when we're looking to our next opportunity, which obviously is also as important. As early as March and April of last year, we saw that the slowdown in flights and operations were going to have an impact on the general aviation industry. Some of the hardest hit segments included our manufacturers, maintenance providers, supply chain, and their respective workforces. We, along with AIA, ARSA, which represents the Repair Station Association, and the IAM, along with other interested stakeholders, began to talk to members of Congress about the importance of aviation manufacturing and maintenance to the economy. And luckily, Senator Moran, Congressman Estes started working on this legislation. As while we weren't successful in the earlier COVID packages, they were convinced that this program was necessary, and they continued to push. They were determined to get this done, and their determination resulted in what we're going to hear about today. We're particularly grateful for their leadership, but also Senator Cantwell, Senator Warner, Representative Rick Larson from Washington State, but also Representative Sam Graves and Representative Sharice Davids, all have, in the House side, helped work to bring this program forward. We appreciate very much them all working across party lines in common cause. And I think that's the great thing about aviation. We really do approach it in a bipartisan way and work to get things done. With the application process now open, we encourage eligible companies to take advantage of the program, which will help strengthen the still fragile supply chain, keep highly skilled workers in the industry, as well as support some of the smaller companies that need assistance to maintain operations. And I think one of the things that was a real selling point within Congress is we have to preserve this workforce. It's not the kind of workforce you can just turn on and turn off and turn back on. You really have to preserve it. There's obviously a regulatory structure, which some of us at times would call burdensome, but at the end of the day, we have to meet those qualifications, and so it's a real challenge. So this kind of proposal is particularly warranted in the aviation industry. I also want to thank Elliot Black for being here today. I know for a fact he's been working diligently at this and has reached out to a number of us to ask questions, get guidance, and we really appreciate his efforts and those of his colleagues at the Department of Transportation. So while the industry continues to face some headwinds, the resilience and dedication of our workforce gives us confidence that we're going to get beyond this pandemic. And so Senator Moran, Representative Estes, your legislative work and commitment has really laid the path to recovery. So thank you very much.
We're almost to the crux of the reason that we're here. I'm sorry for all the prelude, but Elliot Black, the program director for the Aviation Manufacturing Jobs Program, again, thank you for your presence. I mentioned Deb Lupfer with Congressman Estes' office. 3 or 4 of my Wichita staff folks are here. Mike Zamersla, Victoria Caro, Tyler York, and I'm not forgetting Lauren, and one from Washington, D.C., Lauren Bates. Lauren Bates is our team's aviation, transportation, legislative assistant. And this effort on this legislation was in her court the whole time through the ups, well, let me say, through all the downs and then the ups. And Lauren is the one who was the least likely to give up on accomplishing this and kept my feet to the fire to make sure that we never walked away from the chance of this accomplishment. She's technically so capable, and she's intelligent, and she cares, and she's a Kansan, and she is your ally in the world of aerospace and aviation. And I highlight her work in this task and many others that have been beneficial to this community. And so, Lauren, make sure that, stand up and make sure that they recognize you. All right, Mr. Black, we're glad to have you here. This is the individual that helped implement, who drafted with his team the rules and regulations, developed the application, and I hope of all the things that you've heard from us today, this is the one that I recognize to be the most significant. Mr. Black has been at the U.S. Department of Transportation for more than 10 years and chosen to be the leadership of implementing this program. And I hope we have a great opportunity to hear how this program can benefit companies here in Kansas. And perhaps Mr. Black can, if there are challenges or issues that he has the capability of trying to make certain that those are considered by his colleagues at the Department of Transportation. Mr. Black, the stage is yours, and thank you again.
Thank you very much. Great, thank you. Thank you all. It's a privilege and an honor to be here. I'm going to lower this because it's considerably taller than, actually, I'm going to let you handle that before I break anything. It's a privilege and an honor to be back in Wichita. It has been more than 10 years since I've been here. I do want to reiterate my personal appreciation to Senator Moran's staff and Congressman Estes' staff. They've been wonderful to work with in putting together this program and this particular event today. I also really want to thank again AIA, GAMA, and many other associations who have provided invaluable input to us as we've begun putting together this critically important program in a way that can be implemented swiftly and consistently and with a very high degree of accountability to the taxpayers who are providing the funding. So it's great to be here to have the opportunity to talk with you all. I'm going to provide a fairly quick overview of the program and a little bit of information about some details that we know have been of interest. But more importantly, I really want to hear from you all if there are issues or questions that we either haven't heard yet or haven't responded to yet or haven't addressed yet. We're doing this very, very quickly because we get the urgency. And I'm going to pick on Lauren, who's kindly agreed to help take notes on anything where I'm not able to take notes on any IOUs, but I will get back to you if there are questions that I can't answer today. But let's turn first and foremost, if I can figure this out, as just a reminder, the problem that brings us all together today, and I think you probably all remember images like these from the very beginning of the pandemic, just incomprehensible to see aircraft idled like this on a runway of all places. I don't ever want to see an image like this again in the history of this industry. And even as that starts to fade into the background a little bit, we are still faced with the lingering effects of the pandemic, with the decimation of the activity worldwide, as the senator and the congressman both articulated very well. With those activity drops, there was a significant drop in all of the associated maintenance and repair and replacement parts. And the supply chain, everything slowed down. And company after company after company had revenues drop and had to make very difficult decisions about their highly skilled workforce and lay people off or furlough them or reduce pay. And the effects of that have been just horrific. Now, as we begin to see recovery happening in the airline industry and in the broader economy, now more than ever, it's critical for these businesses to be viable and to have the people at the ready able to continue to do their critical work. So very quickly, I'm going to provide an overview of the program. I'm going to talk about one of the biggest issues that we've heard over and over. What does it mean to define the eligible employee group for each company? Because that's a unique issue that every company has to grapple with. And the associated issue of calculating the total compensation level for that eligible employee group. Part of that will be a brief overview and clarification of some key milestones and timeframes that were baked into the statute that I think may help to articulate why we're having to do things the way we are. And I'm going to provide a very quick high-level overview of the application process. I'm going to try not to put you all to sleep with that, and then hopefully have time for questions. Hopefully questions that I can answer. As both the senator and the congressman pointed out, the AMJP, as we call it, is part of the American Rescue Plan Act, which is that $1.9 trillion program. That was what established this program for the first time on March 11th of this year, just a little over 100 days ago. That gives you a sense of just how fast we're moving to get this implemented. It's important to understand, though, with any federal financial assistance program that's taking money from the taxpayers and redistributing it, there are a lot of other associated laws and regulatory requirements that we have to abide by, and those all feed into how we are implementing the program. The basic purpose, as has already been said, is to provide payroll assistance to eligible businesses, and that phrase, eligible businesses, is important, and I know it's important to all of you. Each business can receive up to 50% of the compensation costs for that eligible employee group for up to 6 months. In return, the recipient business has to commit that they will not conduct any involuntary furloughs or layoffs or pay reductions within that eligible employee group during the 6-month term of the AMJP agreement. Sounds pretty simple, right? Well, there's several other commitments and restrictions that go along with that. What kinds of businesses are eligible? There's a lot of interest out there and a lot more businesses than most people on the street recognize. What does it take to keep the aviation industry operating? This language comes largely from statute. The first part is companies that make aircraft or aircraft parts. Has to be under an FAA production approval certificate. That's in the statute. Second group, companies that repair aircraft, repair stations. People who fly a lot may not even realize how many repair stations there are in the United States and how fundamentally critical they are to the operation of the aviation industry. And then the third category is any company that is certified by the Society of Automotive Engineers under AS 9100. It's a very specific certification specified in the law, and that again is another critical criterion. And it's important to understand these are or. A company to be eligible has to meet only one of these three, not two out of three, not all three. But it is important. And yes, there are other requirements and restrictions, and they're all listed on the webpage that we set up. The URL is here. And by the way, we will certainly make these slides available publicly after this program. I see some people frantically taking notes. We will make these available. But those restrictions run the gamut. There's a lot of them, starting with where is the company organized, where is it legally established, how the business has been impacted by the pandemic, whether they really are, whether their principal business is in the aviation industry, and so forth and so on. Next part that's really important is to understand how can an eligible business use this money. It's not just free money to do with as you see fit. It is specifically by statute to facilitate the retention, rehire, or recall of employees. And that's important because, as the senator emphasized and others have emphasized, we're talking about a highly specialized workforce here. That's the fundamental purpose of this money. By statute, it can be used for base compensation, excluding overtime, excluding premium pay, and it can be used for the cost of benefits, and we've not imposed any restrictions on what those benefits might be. By law, though, it cannot be used for back pay of employees that are being rehired or recalled. So the next question that people routinely ask is, well, how much can we get out of $3 billion? $3 billion sounds like a pretty big number, and where I come from, it is. But remember, there's a lot of businesses in this industry. And in order to answer that question, each company must first define its eligible employee group. And in order to do that, you have to look at the provisions in the law, and there's 3 key provisions. The first is the employees that are included in that eligible employee group have to be those who are engaged in manufacturing, aviation manufacturing activities or maintenance, as of April 1st of 2020. And I want you to etch that date in your memories. It's going to come back. I'm probably going to utter it. Well, somebody counted. I think it's about 47 times before I'm done talking. I'm going to keep coming back to that date. It's in the law, and presumably it's in the law because that was just when the pandemic was really getting started. It was really a baseline before most companies had to make major changes. Secondly, the eligible employee group cannot be any larger than 25% of the company's U.S. workforce as of April 1st of 2020. And it can only include employees whose total compensation, not salary, but total compensation, including benefits, is less than $200,000. This is just an illustrative example. Imagine a company with 80 employees worldwide, of which 64 are US-based. What that means is this company's eligible employee group can be no larger than 16 employees, 25% of the US workforce. And what we then do is we then take a look at what those 16 employees are actually paid, what their associated compensation costs are. And in this example, totaling across those 16 employees, this is totally made up, by the way, it's about $1.6 million in total salaries. Add in their benefits, and you get to a point where, well, you look at these numbers, it's about $2.2 million and change, all right? That's a full year's worth of total compensation costs for the eligible employee group. Remember, though, the AMJP can only help for 6 months, so we take half of that. And what we then can provide from the program is half again. So in this particular example, $567,000. And again, this is highly specific to an illustrative example. It will be different for every single company. That's what we call the public contribution. That has to be met by what the company puts in, and the senator referred to this as a public-private partnership. The AMJP can provide up to 50% of those compensation costs for the eligible employee group. The company has to commit to fund the rest for the 6-month period. That's the basic structure of the program. Another major question that we've gotten over and over is, well, do I as a company have to identify the individuals who are in my eligible employee group? And the answer is yes, but only internally. The company has to know who's in that group because the company is legally bound to abide by the restrictions and commitments to those employees. But we don't want to know. We don't want that in the application. And we emphasize this over and over and over again, that we don't want any personally identifiable information about individuals or their compensation or even their jobs or locations. So how to apply? We've tried to make this as simple as possible, but again, we also tried to do it quickly. The application process actually involves 3 agencies. We first, of course, are the Department of Transportation. We're the program office. We're the ones establishing the program. But we're working closely with the General Services Administration, which operates what's called the System of Award Management, or SAM. And one of the first things we did when we launched this program well over 2 months ago, we let everybody know, if you're interested in this program, you must be registered in SAM. And we circulated that information, and they've been doing a great job helping get that done as quickly as possible. But that's a fundamentally critical step, and that system is required for any federal financial assistance program. We then decided to work with the Department of Health and Human Services, which operates what's called Grant Solutions. This is a platform that many agencies use to expedite and run their grant programs. And we concluded that this would be the fastest and simplest way to do it. We could have built something custom-based, but it would have taken a lot longer. So we're working very closely with them, and they too are doing a great job trying to make it as simple as possible. Now the challenge for you good people is, anyone who's applying needs to be aware that there are 3 different agencies, each which has a distinct role. And if questions come up, we're getting questions, sometimes we're referring those to GSA or to the Grant Solutions team, and vice versa. But we're trying to make sure that this information is readily available to everybody. The process starts on our website, the DOT website. At this URL, there's information here on the deadlines, and there's a little button up here, how to apply, cryptically labeled. I wanted it to be in bright flashing green, but the web people wouldn't let me. That will take you to this page, and we have information out there, including an overview of the process, information on how to log in, how to get your username set up. There's also really important information in the Federal Register notices that we've published, as well as frequently asked questions. We've got 58 frequently asked questions published last week, or possibly the week before. Now the weeks are sort of running together. And there will be more coming because we've gotten more questions thanks to all of you who have provided input. There's also a sample application form and sample supporting documentation out there. All of this information is designed to help make this as easy and simple and straightforward as possible, at the same time being accountable to the United States Congress and the US taxpayer. There really are 6 basic steps to the application process. First and foremost, I'm going to say it again, please read the Federal Register notice and the FAQs. They contain important information, even if you think you know everything, because people have raised a lot of nuanced questions, and they're important. Then there's a very simple pre-screening tool, again, and forgive me, that says FAA website. That's incorrect. That was supposed to say DOT website. My apologies. We'll get that fixed. So it's a very simple pre-screening tool. Getting through that successfully will then take you to the link to create a user account on the Grant Solutions platform. What that platform then allows the applicant to do is to download a fillable PDF. We liked this solution because we recognized that every company applying is likely going to need people involved from every part of the company. You're going to probably need people from your accounting, your HR, maybe your law department, maybe labor relations, and so forth. And doing it this way makes it easy for the company to then coordinate that application internally and then upload it back into the Grant Solutions platform with the associated supporting documentation. Again, it seemed the simplest solution that we hope folks are finding helpful. Here again, I'm going to take you back and just show you, this is the place where that green arrow just applied. That's the place to start the process. It takes you to this pre-screening tool. It's one question, but it's an important question. And it just asks that you verify that you meet one of those statutory criteria that I outlined at the beginning. That you make aircraft, that you repair aircraft, or that you hold the certification from SAE. And as long as you click yes to that question, you then get taken to this answer. Based on your initial response, you appear to meet the first criteria, click here. Again, we're trying to make this simple. That then takes you to a username request form for the Grant Solutions tool. Fairly simple form with one notable exception, which is this system is used for a lot of different agencies. So we're trying to highlight, you're going to click Department of Transportation, Office of the Secretary, AMJP. You're going to finish that form, sign it, and you're going to submit it to this address. And then the rest gets pretty easy. I'm going to show you some very simple, quick screenshots, just selected pages from the application. This is literally what it looks like. It's a simple fillable PDF. We tried to make it straightforward. We tried to provide some calculations where we can. I am going to point out we had to make a correction yesterday that will be reflected on this page going forward. Here we refer to tax year. We've realized, okay, that's actually created some confusion. We actually are going to have to change that to calendar year. So we're in the process of getting that change made. We sent out an email yesterday to 15,722 recipients to make sure that people know that that change is coming. But again, we've tried to make the calculations as simple and straightforward as possible, particularly with respect to furloughs, because the way companies use furloughs varies tremendously. So we tried to make this as straightforward as possible and talk about it in terms of paid employee hours, so that companies that stratify levels of furlough or have continuous or periodic furloughs can all provide comparable information. Same thing with definition of the eligible employee group. We've tried to make this as simple as possible, taking the information from the calculations about the total US workforce, the maximum size, and then allow companies to designate the number of people in each of these job categories that they are including in their eligible employee group. I do want to point out there is some important information for what I call large complex business structures, by which I mean any company that has multiple legal entities. And this is in the guidance document, but I just really want to highlight it here in some very plain language. There are companies out there that have a holding company and then multiple subsidiaries with different structures for any number of reasons. Please don't apply at the holding company level unless that level meets all of the criteria. Likewise, don't apply at the second level down if it's a company at the third level down that holds the required FAA certificate. Or likewise, if only one little part meets the requirement for having had a 15% revenue decline from 2019 to 2020. And if only another little part holds the certification from SAE, AS 9100. That gets complicated. And likewise, and this is very important, if the application is being submitted by the CFO of one very small subsidiary, that individual probably doesn't have the legal authority to make the legal commitments that are required for a higher level structure. So it's really important to think carefully about what part or parts of the business do or don't meet those criteria and structure the application and the eligible employee group accordingly. We've highlighted this in the instructions, and I know that a lot of people gloss over when they look at instructions, but we really want to highlight this. We strongly encourage a single consolidated application from a company, including all of its eligible parts. And if a company chooses to do something different, there's an increased risk of delay in the process and an increased risk in the possibility that we may have to deny eligibility. So it's really, really important. It's a foot stomper message is what we like to say, that I really want to highlight there. I mentioned earlier there's been a little confusion about milestones and data points, so I do want to just highlight this very briefly. April 1st of 2020, I'm almost done saying it, but it's really important. That by law has to be the baseline. That's the basis for defining the maximum size of the eligible employee group and the associated cost, the associated total compensation level. In addition, we are asking for data 1 year later, as of March 31st of 2021. And there's reasons that we need that information for that comparison because, among other things, we also need to have a high degree of confidence that the company is going to be able to use the money for the allowable eligible purposes within the time frame of the AMJP agreement. And so we're looking at that for informational purposes, and that's vitally important. By contrast, based on what's in the law, we have to then look at the workforce or operating revenue data from the end of calendar year 2019 to the end of calendar year 2020. And again, this is something we've had to clarify yesterday because we initially referred to tax year. We were doing that to try to make it easy to refer to tax filings for documentation, but we've realized if a company has a different tax year, that's not going to work. So a company will have to look at different documentation to address that. But that is a really crucial comparison for establishing eligibility. A couple of other things, we've had a lot of questions about companies that have taken advantage of the earned employee retention tax credits and when they've done that. Bottom line to make this simple is, if a company earned those credits during the quarter ending June 30th of 2021, then we cannot provide an agreement during the calendar quarter that ends September 30th of 2021. And it's really that simple. We may be able to award an AMJP agreement in the subsequent quarter, but that's the relationship that's set forth in law. If you got these credits in one quarter, we can't provide an agreement in the subsequent quarter. Likewise, if a company took a PPP loan, a Paycheck Protection Program loan, the issue is whether they are still spending or retaining those funds as of the date the application is submitted. And if that happens, then we cannot award an AMJP agreement. So again, we're just trying to make that as simple and straightforward as possible. It doesn't matter whether the loan was forgiven or if an applicant has requested forgiveness of the loan but hasn't gotten it yet. That's immaterial. What matters is whether the company still has any money left from one of those loans. We got a number of questions about how do you calculate total compensation level as of a point in time. So I'm going to just show this to you very quickly. We know that there are companies out there that pay employees on a monthly basis or bi-monthly or semi-weekly or weekly. So what we've done is we've said, look, identify the pay period that includes the date of Wednesday, April 1st of 2020. Just focus on that one pay period. And then multiply that by whatever factor gives you an annualized figure. If it's a monthly figure, multiply it by 12. Semi-monthly, multiply it by 24. Bi-weekly, multiply it by 26, and so forth. And you'll notice that you get the same answer, 2.269 million in each of these cases. Again, we're just asking you take that pay period and extrapolate it and come up with an annualized total compensation level. And that's then what gets plugged in. On this form, you're going to enter the amount for the pay period and designate the frequency so that the math works out. The certifications are vitally important. And again, I really want to emphasize, the application must be certified by an individual who is authorized to make legal commitments on behalf of the company. And these certifications are crucial because if indeed we find the company eligible, we are then going to be sending you a legal agreement, a contractual agreement that has all of those same certifications, and you will be attesting under penalty of perjury with severe criminal circumstances if there's information that is incomplete or incorrect. Why do we do that? Why do we, a lot of people think this is bureaucracy at its worst. This is accountability to the United States taxpayer. It's vitally important. So please read those carefully. So what happens next after the application process concludes at 5 p.m. prevailing Eastern Time on Tuesday, July 13th? First and foremost, we're going to review and validate all of the requests, including the supporting documentation. We're going to verify everybody's eligibility, and we will verify or establish what the public contribution can be for each eligible applicant. We're going to then tabulate those results, and we will notify applicants. We'll go through a process first. And then, as I said, we will send a formal legal contract to each applicant. Once the company has signed that and sent it back, we will then make an initial disbursement. And our goal, again, is to get that money out as quickly as we possibly can. And then companies can request subsequent disbursements, depending on their needs and the timing, and they'll need to submit support documentation. And I have to emphasize again, because we have a lot of oversight agencies ensuring that these monies are being used correctly, there will be audits. Everything will get looked at, either by our auditors, by the Department of Transportation Office of the Inspector General, the Government Accountability Office. There's a lot of folks who make sure that we are using money correctly and that recipients are using money correctly. And that is the end of my prepared remarks. And hopefully I talked long enough that there isn't time for any really difficult questions. I value easy questions. Great, thank you all for coming. Okay, I can't, all right, I see a hand up over there, sorry. They're running microphones up. Very good, yeah. All right, well, I'm
Requirement for the FAA production approval certificate, is that if you're a sub-tier manufacturer for like Spirit, you work for Spirit, if they have a certificate and you supply them parts, is that sufficient?
Let me repeat the question, and I appreciate the question. The question is, if a company, and I'm going to paraphrase this, I think what you're asking is, if a company provides materials or parts to somebody else who holds an FAA production certificate, is that sufficient even if the applicant themselves does not? We actually just received this question, and we are looking at it closely. It's a complicated question. Our read of the statute is that the company has to have that actual certificate. That's our interpretation. Okay. Thank you for asking.
Andy Parrison with Kansas Coil Spring, small manufacturing company.
Yes.
I think we qualify, but this whole system with SAMs, Grant Solutions, and so forth, and July 13th. So we have several agencies that we have to have gotten the SAMs number, we have to have gotten Grant Solutions, all before July 13th, and the application. That's about, with a holiday in between, physically possible, getting all those people to line up?
I appreciate the question, and I appreciate the concern. So first and foremost, the first step in getting the SAM registration is having a DUNS number, and many, many companies already had that. Secondly, and this is why we pushed so hard to get that information out back in mid-April, that the SAM registration process can take some time, especially when there are multiple programs with multiple businesses seeking that registration. If a company has not yet completed that process, we strongly urge you, get it done as fast as you can. Follow up if there is additional information needed. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It would be very difficult to start that process today and get it done in time, but give it your best shot. The Grant Solutions piece is very fast. Filling out that form, that gets turned around very, very quickly. That should not represent an impediment. At the same time, we have put out on our website a sample of the application form expressly so that if a company is still awaiting their final SAM registration, they can at least begin reviewing that and getting the necessary documentation together. We have 18 days yet before the deadline, and I will tell you, the 4-week period, it was going to be shorter until we realized that it was going to hit that holiday, so I'm with you on that. But we have tried to make it as clear and simple as possible, and absolutely give it your best shot, and I hope and pray you can get through it. So thank you for the question.
Donna Lehan, I'm with Spirit, retired, but I'm still involved with SPIA, the Engineering and Technical Unit.
Great.
You said that these slideshows would be out there?
Yes.
Are they on that website by the email, or could you give that to us? Thank
Yes,
you.
we will post these slides on the DOT website, and they may be elsewhere as well. I'm not certain about that, but we'll absolutely get them onto the DOT website. Give me half a day to get that done.
Royce Schmidt with Rickman Machine. I would argue that the April 1, 2020 date is not an ideal date because of the largest aviation program in the nation is the 737. That aircraft had shut down. And as a result, small companies like us, we react very quickly. And our highest paid employees, i.e. the owners, weren't getting paid on April 1, 2020. And as a result, you're not targeting really the entire employees group that you need to be looking at. You should be looking at the end of 2019.
I appreciate the comment. Thank you so much. Regrettably, that is the date that's in the statute. I don't think that there's much we can do about that, but I will take a look at it, and I appreciate you mentioning that. Thank you. Surely that can't be all of the questions. Unless I've bored you all to sleep.
Hi, Tim McGinney, United Machine.
Yes,
do you anticipate that the $3 billion is going to be enough to cover all the applications? If not, what do you do? Do you prorate it, or?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked. Thank you so much. The question is $3 billion going to be enough? We don't know yet. We did some preliminary analysis based on payroll data from 2017, just as a marker, and tried to gauge. We don't know yet. But the law is very specific. If we get more eligible requests than the funds can accommodate, then we are required by law to reduce those for everybody on a pro rata basis. So we're prepared to do that arithmetic right quick once all the applications are in. But thank you for asking. Is there a question down here? She's bringing a mic. Hold on.
Much like they extended the tax deadline, is there any possibility that you could extend the deadline for when these applications have to be submitted?
So,
you are the federal government. Come on now.
So thank you for asking. And you're not the first to ask that question. Could we theoretically extend the deadline? Theoretically, that's possible, but we would not be able to do that without impacting the entire program. One important statutory provision says that there cannot be more than 6 months that elapse between the effective date of the first agreement and the award of the final agreement. And that in conjunction with the requirement to pro-rata reduction, those two provisions work together. So if this were to be delayed, it would delay the delivery of a single dollar to anybody. And that's why we've been at such pains to try to get information out as early as possible and as broadly as possible to everybody to try to get this done as quickly as possible. And I will tell you, it's a little bit of inside baseball, but part of what we wanted to do was to try to get everybody, sorry. I wasn't sure if I needed to call in a hostage rescue team for a second here. Besides, the $3 billion is in that backpack, not in my pocket. But we tried as much as possible to get that word out so that people could be taken care of, the DUNS numbers and SAM registration, in parallel with us developing the more detailed application procedures. That was our core strategy to try to get this money out quickly. So we really, again, are hoping and praying that we can get everybody through this. That's been our goal all along, to get it out quickly, hopefully at this fiscal year. That's a key part of our goal, if we can possibly do it.
Thank you for clarifying that you were going to try to do that initial distribution still this fiscal year. Kind of
Yes.
as a add-on to that, do you have a sense for how much that distribution could be in terms of either a percentage of the application, or is there any kind of formula out there yet for that?
Really, it's a great question. We don't have any idea at this point until we actually get all applications in and verify eligibility. And part of the reason that we can't have certainty about that is that while we know for many companies what their payroll was in 2017, we don't know what it was in 2020. We don't know what percentage of their workforce was involved in aviation or what percentage of their workforce was US-based. So there's a lot of reasons we couldn't do that arithmetic, so we just really don't know. We have to wait and see the full scope of eligible applications that we get, what the total amounts are. The good news is the arithmetic will be very simple once we get it, once we have all that data, but we don't have the data yet to be able to estimate. Absolutely.
Yeah, Wes Lumry. I'm with Peregrine. We do engineering and STCs for several aviation companies. My question is, since we have DERs, we have an ODA at the FAA right now, are we eligible?
So I can't answer the specifics. The statute is really very clear about requiring either production approval from FAA or Part 145 repair stations or holding the SAE AS 9100 certification.
So would
Here, can you choke up on the mic if you would, please?
yeah, if you can do PMA parts and you're authorized by the FAA to do PMA authorization?
On the surface, based on what you're saying, I don't think so, but I'd have to take an IOU on that. I believe the language regarding a production approval certificate is very specific. And I'll just anticipate the question because we've received it from several other people. A lot of folks have said, well, ISO 9001 or 14001 is very similar to AS 9100. Does that count? And the answer is we don't have that latitude. And we've addressed that in one of the published FAQs as well, frequently asked questions on the website. We have a lot of people asking that. It's very, very specific.
Linda Coleman with Tech Aerospace. This may seem like a simple question, but if you identify the 25% of your eligible employees and something unforeseen happens in your business and you end up having to have a reduction in force in the other 75%, have you violated the terms of the agreement, the job protection?
Great question, thank you. One of the commitments for receiving this money is that a company has to notify the Secretary of Transportation of any involuntary layoffs or furloughs outside of the eligible employee group if it's more than 10%. Okay? There's nothing that restricts that, but it is naturally our earnest hope, and I think it's probably everybody's hope, that by providing this financial support ostensibly for the eligible employee group, that's going to help the company overall and increase the financial stability to the point where hopefully those kinds of actions don't have to happen. That certainly is my fervent hope, and I'm confident that that's everybody's hope as well.
Hi, Jody Leisure with Dynamic NC. My question is, once you've entered into the agreement with the DOT and you have gone through the process of the rehire, retention, and recall and expended those funds, what's the process for demonstrating that you have met your commitment and close out the agreement?
Great question. Thank you for asking. So what we're going to require is proof that the company has indeed rehired or recalled employees and spent the additional funds on payroll. We will require what I'm referring to as redacted payroll reports. Again, we don't need to know the individuals' names, but we do need to see actual accounting documentation that the funds have been spent for the intended purpose. Thank you for asking.
Mario Bonilla, with CPA Advisors. Is any restrictions for a U.S. company that is owned by a foreign parent? And also the second question will be, have you addressed taxability? Is that in the statute something that mentions the tax treatment, or you just follow regular U.S. tax law?
Okay, forgive me. I want to be sure that I understood correctly. Can you repeat the first part of the question? I just want to be sure I heard it right.
Are there any restrictions if you got a U.S. company that is owned by a foreign corporation?
Okay, thank you. Yes. So the language that matters in the statute is the company has to be organized under the laws of the United States. It does not necessarily have to be a U.S.-owned company, and that's an important distinction. The focus of this program, however, is on U.S. jobs, U.S. workforce. So that's where our focus is on. We need to see that the company is organized and incorporated in one of the 50 states or the like, but we don't ask about ownership specifically. Thank you. This hasn't historically been a shy industry. Can probably ask Paul or Tom, was there anything that you were hoping somebody was going to ask that they haven't yet? Here it comes. I'm probably tempting fate by doing this. I'll make it easy. DOT is spelled sorry. I'm going for easy questions here.
You were just mentioning the timing, and you said the deadline is July 13th. Would the intention be to get the payments then in this calendar year?
We're hoping to do better than this calendar year. Okay. We are hoping, and it's going to be a heavy lift, but it is our hope that we can actually award agreements and make initial disbursements before the end of the federal fiscal year, which means before September 30th. That's our goal. We understand how acutely important and urgent this program is, and we're really trying everything we can to get the money out as quickly as we can while still being accountable to the taxpayers who provided the funding. Thank you for asking. That's an important distinction. Yes. Thank you. Another important distinction. He's asking whether we're trying to get the entire amount out. The answer is no. What we're trying to do is to award all agreements, all eligible agreements before the end of the fiscal year and make an initial disbursement. Now, what percentage that actually represents yet is to be seen, but we want to get an initial push of money out as quick as we can before the end of September. The balance would then follow over the ensuing 6 months of the AMJP agreements. Thank you for asking. Yes.
So if I heard you correctly, this is specific to the holding of the production certificate to be eligible. Company that has a structure like that, holdings and other entities underneath it, needs to apply at the level where the production certificates are held.
Yeah, so the question is whether the application actually needs to be submitted by the entity that holds the production certificate. Yes, as that is our strong counsel. We recognize that there may be companies out there that will come in and say, well, we've got this situation where we've bifurcated the structure for this reason, and the certificate is held here, but the employees are actually here. The problem, again, the more complicated that gets, the increased risk is it's going to slow us down, and we may ultimately have to say no. So we really are encouraging companies, structure the application as much as possible in a way that includes all of the meets all of those eligibility criteria in the simplest way possible. Thank you for letting me. And okay, over here. Air traffic control says up there.
Leslie Hazelton from Cox Machine.
Great.
I wanted to make sure I understood correctly. We're talking about recall. So you have the dates of April 1st and then March of this year.
Yes.
If we have employees that are on furlough and we bring them back sometime during that 6 months, would those people be eligible under the plan? We haven't brought them back today.
Right.
We go through the application process, but we begin bringing them back.
Yes.
Will those people be eligible?
Yes. The reason I'm hesitating is we've gotten so many variations on this question, I want to make sure that I'm answering it correctly. What you've described is actually the core objective of the program, which is to enable companies to bring back employees who were laid off or furloughed. So as long as that happens, that's great. The variations on that question that we've heard are, well, some of the people that we had to lay off or furloughed, they've now left the area, or they've left the business, they're no longer available. Can we hire different people, or can we move people in from other parts? And we're trying to provide as much latitude as possible to say yes in those circumstances, but the amount of money is still going to be based on what the eligible employee group looked like as of April 1st of 2020. So thank you for letting me add on to your question. Thank you. What else? I actually don't have an ability to see a clock anywhere, so I don't know how we're doing on time. All right, very good. I'll get the hook in a moment, I'm sure.
It's nice to see you be questioned instead of me.
Perfect. That's a great question for the senator. Sorry.
Kevin Ashton with Axiom Engineering. So the ERTC program is just hugely beneficial. It's been great. It only goes through the second quarter. So if we take advantage of that in the second quarter, then the way I'm understanding this is we won't be able to join this program till the fourth quarter of this year.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, possibly, maybe the senator, is there any chance the ERTC program is going to be extended to the third and fourth quarter of this year?
So it's a great question, and I'm going to venture a partial answer here. I actually was told that may have already happened or that it may be underway. I don't know for sure, though. Do you happen to know whether the ERTC is being extended beyond? Because I thought that it ended on July 1st, and somebody recently said, actually, no, it's been extended or that's happening. So we'll
know. Okay, because at that point, now companies are going to be out there trying to decide, okay, what's more beneficial, the ERTC program or this program? So that'd be kind of a tough choice, and it's going to be hard to compete with ERTC. That's a great program.
Understood.
Somewhat related. My question would be, you cannot double dip. If you've received other benefits, and I don't know that the conversation described what those other things that might discount or eliminate the capability of being compensated under this program.
Right. So thank you, sir. I'll provide a very quick overview. There are 3 programs that were specifically identified in the AMJP statutory provisions. The first, I'm going to get these in the wrong order, I think the ERTC actually was the first one. And the limitation there is about timing. If a company was taking ERTC credits in one quarter, then we cannot provide an AMJP agreement in the subsequent quarter. The second part, I believe, was the payroll support program under the CARES Act. And it's very simple. If a company received funding under that program, then they are ineligible for the AMJP. The third category was the Paycheck Protection Program, which was the loan program. And the provision there, again, is time-bound. If a company was still expending or retaining funds under a PPP loan at the time of application, then we can't help you. But many companies that took PPP loans, they've fully expended those monies, and so that's not an issue. In other words, if they got it, they can still get this money. There is one other point, though, that was made, that Section 3610 of the CARES Act allowed certain companies to get certain financial benefits that could help with payroll costs. And so one of the points we've made is, look, if there's any other program that's helping pay for your payroll during the time of the AMJP agreement, then we can't help you, or we'll have to reduce the AMJP contribution accordingly. So we are having to ask about that question in a very broad way, but we are absolutely trying to avoid that double dipping, expressly because you said it so well, sir. It's a partnership. It's a public-private partnership. There is an expectation that the company is ponying up the dollars to keep people on board.
Maybe our last question.
All right. Make it a good one.
This is
Well, this is a quick question. First, how did you come up to $3 billion as the number? And secondly, is there any accountants in here that'd like to take on this job of filling out the paperwork for us all?
So that's actually a perfect segue, because I don't know that I can be the one to answer the $3 billion question.
The $3 billion question came up, was derived at just congressional negotiations, tried to figure out in a package of how much money we're going to spend, which turned out to be a lot of money, how much can we allocate here and here and here? Everybody had their own cause, and we were successful in getting $3 billion of that pot of money for this program. No, I don't think there's any scientific or methodical basis. It was the give and take of trying to satisfy the political demands of everybody who wanted something in that bill.
And I'd like to thank you for providing me with such a gracious exit. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Kansan.
You did that very well.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation, for coming from Washington, D.C. and providing information. I tried to gauge in my listening to the questions and the responses whether there was problems in this program or whether this is broadly going to be something that's of value to Kansas companies in this business. And I detected in some ways both, and I hope people saw the earlier requirement of filing the SAM. We tried to educate Kansans in every way we knew how and tried to get the media in our state and tried to get organizations to spread that word. And I can understand the challenge with July 13th. I leaned over to ask Mr. Gentile what the circumstance was, and he at least tells me he thinks most people are in the process or have applied or close to applying. So I hope that's the case, because that's the timing. The July 13th is a very short time frame if you haven't set the stage for the application. I don't know how to conclude this other than to tell you that we're here to help you, Congressman Estes. Never want to give a congressman the suggestion they should be a senator. Congressman Estes and I and our teams are here to help, and we'll try to provide any additional information or check in with the U.S. Department of Transportation if there's something else that comes up. And my other suggestion would be I think there are people in this room who are your business colleagues who are in the same profession as you are, who have been pursuing this and can be helpful one to another. So I hope that there's a network of folks here who try to, if there's problems, try to figure out how we solve them collectively to make this work. And again, $3 billion is a lot of money. You said it well, it's a lot of money to me. It has its limitations whenever there's such significant demands, but we'll try to make sure the money is spread appropriately and fairly. And as I listened to the presentation, I recognize that most of us, many of us would say that's a lot of work and a lot of details and I's to dot and T's to cross, but the challenges we face is, and we've seen it in the COVID relief packages in other sectors, is the amount of fraud that goes on in which people do not conduct themselves in an honorable way, and they're looking for the opportunity to take some money that's government money, taxpayer money, in a program. And so anytime we have a program like this, it gets very complicated trying to prevent people from cheating. And I don't know how to overcome that, except our parents should have all raised us to know better. I'm delighted that you're here, and I hope this was helpful to you, and we're here to continue to provide assistance as you go through the process. And thank you very much for your presence today. Thanks to the team.